My name is Dubbeld. I'm a senior lecturer in sociology and social anthropology at Stellenbosch University. I'm here doing a book project called Unsettled Futures, Precarity and the Paradoxes of the Post-Apartheid Project in the Countryside. The book really is an examination of the first 18 years of democracy in South Africa, and it tries to examine that project of democracy through an ethnographic examination of the countryside and of a particular area that has been remade fundamentally by the state, by infrastructural developments, by which I mean housing, roads, electricity and water. And what I'm trying to look at is how democracy has been experienced and what the effects of democracy have been for people in this countryside location. I argue that the countryside is actually not a neglected space under the post-apartheid regime, but rather a space that's fundamentally changed. It no longer becomes the opposite of the city, but in a sense peripheral to the city. It stands in a peripheral relationship, and people depend largely on work. And so the starting point really of the project is the introduction to the book, and really that begins with the question of unemployment and the incapacity really of the post-apartheid state to deal with unemployment. So you find successive leaders after apartheid raising the question of unemployment in every state of the nation, and yet there's a palpable incapacity to deal with it systematically and finally. So small projects do get created, but they're not sustained, and unemployment for the first 10 or 15 years stays at around 25% in the formal definition, and with COVID today, it's in the formal definition exceeding 30%. Of course, in the unofficial definition, including those people who are not looking for work, for much of the post-apartheid period, it was in the 30s, at around 33 or 34%, and now it's at 43%. That facilitates a discussion or theorization of three main concepts that I did some research into and that really frame the book. The first concept is precarity, and I spent some time working through this concept, looking both at the concept as defined by Guy Standing in the global north, as well as some of the global south critics, drawing on work that was done in India, in Brazil and in South Africa, and thinking what are the differences between societies that had stable employment around Fordism and have suddenly faced flexibilization of work, and societies where the labor market was for long much smaller and has become precarious as well, or more precarious as well with flexibilization. So I try and figure out some of the tensions around that. The other questions that emerge are around a focus on the infrastructural character of the post-apartheid state, where that comes from. So a lot of scholars speak about the state's inability to direct and build the economy, but never discuss how much infrastructure has been built. So I try and work through that. I also think about where infrastructure comes from and where the models for, say, the RDP house comes from, and I trace that genealogy back to links potentially with Eastern Europe and the Soviet Union. Finally, I consider the question of the future itself and futurity. I open up to contemporary debates in anthropology and in cultural studies around the nostalgia for the future, the absence of a future, a sense that the future is over, a palpable sense of futurelessness or shapelessness that we experience in the present. And I try and relate this to political developments. If the post-apartheid state was built on the idea of a better life for all, what is it to think about a future that cannot be transformed, that cannot really fundamentally create the possibilities for a new life, a better life?